Good tea for the knees and for inner peace. So please, just breathe. Tight. Have you ever felt like your own story was out of your control? Like you just go through life, a human with all the human flaws, just raw dogging against the randomness of reality with no anchor to who you are. I'm right there with you, my nigga. Like, for real. Real shit. Often I felt like my own narrative, the movie of my life, was preset with these attributes. Some good, some great, some bad. All baked into the fabric of my story. If I was the main character, oftentimes I felt like I was turning into the butt of some lesson that was for an unseen viewer. The story happened to me, and no rhyme or reason foretold the purpose behind the transitions from scene to scene. That right there led me to the lowest depths of my life. That right there led me to psychosis and the cold embrace of lunacy. And that right there is a lack of agency. An agency to me is this force that propels our will forward towards the actions that change our lives. If you know what I'm talking about, you've probably felt it, or in this case, its lack within your own life. That emptiness and ensuing disorientation as you run around trying to latch on to anything that can give you a sense of purpose. As humans, that is quite literally all we can ask for, a sense of purpose. Some find it in money, others in God. It's my belief that there are virtually no wrong answers as long as that thing grants you agency. It's the truest spark to action, and we all deserve that spark, really. We all do. Because when we lose our agency, we become shells of ourselves in our scramble for some illusion of control. That leads to damage. That leads to shit. Yeah. But I say all that to say that all is not lost, I know this because I've since found a sense of my own agency. And in seizing it, it has opened up my potential in ways I'm forever grateful. And while it's not perfect, nothing ever is, it has moved me to create again, to make something of myself against the chaos I exist within. Welcome to THE.MAZIST. I'm your host, Christopher, and today we're exploring the wizard, the wayfinder, the wild. So, before the quest, before the great psychosis, I started my journey like any hero would. I went to the wizard. In this case, the wizard was a particular vision I had for myself. When I was a child, I was obsessed with magic and superheroes, realms where quite literally anything was possible. Like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, The Last Airbender, shit, the entirety of Marvel and DC. I was not so different from most young boys in that era, but like magic and the potential it carried stuck with me, really in my core. So much so, my parents gave me multiple get real talks as I transitioned through middle school into high school. They were rightfully scared. I mean, imagine your army veterans who built a life on hard work, Christianity, and pragmatism, and your 11-year-old son can't stop talking about wanting to be a wizard or superhero, like it was an actual possibility. You'd be scared too, especially as far as religious beliefs were concerned, I don't blame them. Not at all. And as I entered high school and started to compete with peers in various extracurriculars, out of a certain survival, I ignored that inner child that dreamt of spells changing the world, of a wizard superhero a la Doctor Strange that could save reality from collapse. You feel me? I started to buy into the narrative of the real. But something changed, In hindsight, I think I got bored of the story my school tried to paint for its students. The tried and true path of going to an elite college and into the corporate world or any world of conventional merit and high access. And I thought that shit was just played out. That shit was just not for me, my nigga. Like, what? Like, it's not, no. And somehow that little wizard found its way back into my heart through photography and poetry. I began my Instagram, then titled Called Jericho, as a way to share the pictures I started taking on my phone. It started as random shots I just felt called to capture, a simple blog of poetic fragments of snapshots. Excuse me. I'm just burping a lot. Like, yeah. Let me continue. As I continued with the practice, jeez, man. Sorry. As I continued with the practice, I began experimenting with Snapchat and its like filters and stuff to create these like hyperchromatic collages. I took apart my being with these pictures. Hands and eyes became symbols. Faces became canvases for new expressions, strange shapes that only I could see. Putting those images out did something to me. It was like a window into a different world, created out of snapshot distortions of my real one. I started to believe in this strange realm, or the characters of this realm. They were calling me out of my shell even, I became more confident, but also very detached as these characters actually started to talk to me, you know what I mean? More than what I bargained for, to be honest. I took the stimuli and ran with it. To its natural conclusion, I slowly slipped into psychosis as the art took a life of its own. The wizard that the art was capturing, bringing to life, he led me to strange conclusions and dangerous terrain. In the hero's journey, this would be considered crossing the threshold and the first ordeals. But in the midst of it all, in the face of my lunacy and the people who loved me, it felt like just a big-ass failure, My recovery from psychosis was laden with depression and mania, and I felt like I couldn't trust myself. I couldn't trust my mind, not anymore. It was then, in the reflection of my shadows, that I realized the true power my art was heralding. Cue the Wayfinder. It was in the years after my first major psychotic break that I decided to develop my artistry out of a soul necessity, yeah, but also to give myself a practice beyond the shit I was doing, and I was doing just shit, jumping job to job, applying myself to the bare minimum. I was a shell of what I used to be. And music, specifically hip-hop and writing, became my safe haven to reclaim what little dignity I felt I had left. I was desperate to find my sound, to find my way. And when we first start the artistic process, it's mostly trial and error. I knew that, but there was a part of me that was like, I'm the best. I'm the most unique out there, the most wizardy, the most different. So, imagine my frustration when those reality checks hit. And I realized people just didn't care, I didn't even see me, or my work just wasn't there yet, A lot can be true in this era for a lot of artists. I think I'm just, coming to terms with that was a little bit difficult for me, For each project I completed in those early days, I thought of them as my introduction into the underground. And I hated how little it seemed in the sea of the internet. I kept going, though. Against all odds, I kept going. And something interesting happened as I lived with my words and worked with them. A bond occurred between my mind and the expression of my mind. I saw the through line, the motif or theme, you could say. I couldn't escape it, The magic that led me to those pictures. The magic that lived within my words and made me see the wizard I was not only channeling, but becoming more and more by the piece. I saw the beginnings of a mythos, a story set not in the normal world of everyday shortcomings, but a realm that was just as much a dream or nightmare as it was a chrysalis of transformation. Still in pieces, I seeked out the fragments of my future in the creations that kept me sane. The Wayfinder didn't become out of the blue. It became out of method, a method for the wild. I can't lie. I'm a little mad at myself because I don't have as many pictures I used to have of this time period of my life when I moved to Austin. All of them really only exist on Instagram. And I look back on them now and realize how much time I really spent on Instagram. Wishing, really just wishing. Dipping into the black mirror with the gold maze, now a somewhat fluent design and rap. I thought I was the shit. More than that, I started trying to build, really work with this music shit. I closed the distance between me and the world through consistent practice and hopefully authentic performance. Not really considering the dismissal of college that catapulted into this journey. I think I really just had whiplash. Excuse me. Damn. Why am I getting so... It's that damn tea. Fuck. And disregarding my friends and family in this, in this story, they truly did what they could to help. And I love them for it. But, life was just lifing, like, nigga. The pressure got real, and I snapped again. But this time was different. It had urgency. I dealt with things, and that phrase, like, I dealt with things, is bullshit. It's a simplification, really. But, like, I went through some sort of mad science magic odyssey within the time period of 2 months, and I can't really explain it. I mean, I will at some point, but, like, I can't right now really explain it more than that. I was trapped in a loop by the end of it, and genuinely losing my shit. It was also different this time that I had written throughout the experience. I kept my journals from this time. Well, the only journal I really have from a psychosis was from my first psychosis back in, like, 2020. But more on this on another episode. But what was I saying? Yeah. I did write during that time, though, my second psychosis. That was 2023 to 2024. Though it was only in cryptic messages and outlines written within my Google Docs. I was organizing characters, organizing a world that wasn't so different from our own, but revealed to be more than meets my eye. And they made literary sense as far as outlines go, but I slowly realized with, like, a funny oddball horror that, like, this made up my literal worldview now. I couldn't look at systems, at the people working within those systems, the same way again. I looked at hip-hop differently, more like a wizard would look at the wild of his craft. The rogue scientists, the alchemists, the supervillains, the mafiosos with their own code of honor. All codes of a deep magic language that I was beginning to find my own voice within, all part of a world of many layers, realms, and spectra. I studied my outlines, outside of my lunacy, within the confines of the creative process, and I developed angles, I guess you could say. Ways to rap as if I were speaking from that world's many players' perspectives. I wanted to speak as if the world was real and I was living within it, showing you the logic of it, the philosophy that comes from, let's say, a time traveler who can only move towards the future, or a wizard detective syncing with the spell of a mad sphinx. I'm referencing specific shit from my own art, but I say that to say that this is what I ultimately mean by seizing agency. My system of psychosis-inspired mythos made a method for the madness. There was a purpose. There was an aesthetic. There was devices, narrative, grammar, stylistic choices, a purpose. The wizard ultimately led me to my shadow, my lunacy, and I had to deal with it, practically and theoretically. While its medium is written in spoken word and I frame it creatively, I find these depths, these codes and grammars to be an extension of my mind, where I can see its structures, its own system for becoming. In summation, I believe we all deserve our eventual deprogramming. When we fall out of the system of normal or conventional to seek out our purpose, we start to venture our unknowns, our calls to adventure. I feel like there's this like grand movement towards spirituality right now and esoteric thought, but only as it can be utilized for some business model, some like get rich scheme, you know? Like I'm seeing a bunch of shit that's just like how I use law of visualization, how I use manifestation, to how I use law of detachment to get like my billionaire lifestyle at 20. And I'm like, yo, what? Like, nigga, the fuck you talking about? Like, it just seems absurd. And that's, I don't want to sound like I'm being a hater, but I feel like I really am. You know, I kind of don't want to care about that anymore, you know? No one is really applying the transformative effect these philosophies can have on the practice of becoming. They only see it through some material gain, through some aesthetic, some optic of success, you know? Larger than any business model is the practice of becoming, you know? Let me rephrase. During this whole video, I've been reclaiming traumas both subtle and surreal to show how I've gained a vision for my future, a vision that I move towards every day, towards my practice. This reclamation is the right of any person who's experienced pain and loss. And it is crucial in the transition to some form of agency within their life. So I want y'all to stay the entire video to take away these points, these key points. Find your wizard. That is, find your key to deeper wisdom, to the deeper understanding of self. Then become the Wayfinder, an archetype of seekers. This tea is gas prone, man. Gas prone. Sorry, distracted. Become the Wayfinder, an archetype of seekers of experimental action and system out of chaos. And then, finally, venture the wild, where practice meets the real world and you get to test your theory of self via your mediums of choice, through your voice. You know, the world is waiting for you to become, like the flowers that bloom inevitably within the cycles of your nature. So take that step. And just like that, boom. Now we get to the Mazist Institute. Now we get to the Maze verse. If you like this video and you want to explore the ever-expanding world of the Mazist, you can do two things for me. You can go to my blog on Substack, The Mazist, where I have a plethora of poetry and prose for the seeker to enjoy. I'm also in the beginnings of a world-building series for my upcoming rap project, so check that out. And you can also check out the music. That's Gold Maze, GLD Maze, all caps when you spell the man's name. The fuck? Come on. All platforms. That's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, all that shit. I just released a full-length album just last December, so please check that out if you will. And any way you slice it, you know, you're a part of the journey now, through the maze of life, with your boy. Yeah. So make yourself comfortable, you know. We are in this for the long haul. So links in the bio for all that good stuff. You feel me? Like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this one. But for now, Maze out.